Oh my god! It was worse than I thought.
Yeah.
Nick, I think this is the first failing grade. This is an F.
Yeah,
this is the first failing grade that we've got.
Yeah.
Hello and welcome to May the Review Be With You with Nick and Joe. I'm Joe.
I'm Nick.
And today we are continuing our time travel draft with next up on the board, the 2019 mega hit, Avengers Endgame. Nick,
Yes.
this is your pick. And
Yes.
for a very interesting category in the time travel draft, a quick reminder on what this is in case this is your first time. Good chance it is. First time listening to this. Nick and I are doing a film time travel draft in which we drafted films of only the time travel variety in different categories. And this particular category is comedy. If you're familiar, or if you want to be familiar with the rest, check out our threads or check out our previous episodes. But in any case, Nick, you're up on deck for comedy today. How come you went with Avengers Endgame?
Well, it hadn't been picked yet in our draft. And I think we had already done, I forget the order now. We might have done superhero already. Because one of the categories is superhero time travel film. Either way, the Avengers films are hilarious. Right? Like, of course, they're about superheroes. There's some drama involved. There's some action involved. But there is comedy. You cannot deny the comedic relief that is the Avengers films. And Endgame is one of the funniest of all of them. And so I was like, you know what? This fits in the category quite well. And this is a fantastic movie. I'm also trying to beat Joe in this time travel draft. And I wasn't going to let him pick it. So I picked Avengers Endgame as a time travel comedy film. Quite the category to put Endgame in. But here we are.
You definitely get some creative points from me in doing so. And I think it's an interesting choice for a couple of reasons. A, because like maybe it's not what you would automatically think of for time travel comedy. It's certainly not what I thought of for time travel comedy. But B, I think it's interesting because this is actually, I think you nailed a very divisive issue when it comes to Marvel films in general, right? Because I think most people would agree with you that there is a lot of comedy in these films, and like a lot of people are all for it. And there's a big part of the audience that's like, they're too quippy, they're too jokey, right? But either way, people are in consensus. Yeah, there's a lot of like humor to these films.
Right.
So yeah, I think you kind of nailed that one.
Well, anyone out there who thinks that they're too funny or too quippy, they can just log offline. We don't need you. We don't need you on the internet. You're wrong. You're just wrong.
You know what I think
comedy
it is?
Coming.
I think people like, because like it obviously, you know, you have Robert Downey Jr. kicking it off with Iron Man being like the very like quick-witted character that could, you know, bring a sense of like skepticism or surrealness to like, or not surrealness, like realisticness to an otherwise like fantastical or science fiction genre, right? Like you could poke fun at it, right? And then you had like Joss Whedon come in and direct Avengers and like really like kick that up a notch. And I think like since like Joss Whedon's Avengers, like they've tried to capture like that same level of wittiness or quippiness throughout the Avengers films. And I think that's why some people have a problem with it. Not necessarily maybe the quippiness. They say it's because of the quippiness, because I think it's actually they have a problem with Joss Whedon. Which like, hey, fair if you do. I get it. But I don't know. Joe and Anthony Russo, not Joss Whedon. And I'm a big fan of the Russo brothers. I like them a lot.
Yeah, they're great. I do like them a lot as well. I think they did a fantastic job with this film. And let's get into it. We're not going to review the whole movie. This is specifically about the time travel from Avengers Endgame. There is a lot going on. This film has, I think, the most going on from a time travel perspective of all the movies in our draft, because we are dealing with a lot of characters, right? How many are there? I probably should have counted now, actually, that I'm thinking about it.
You didn't do your homework?
Yeah, not for how many different timelines we travel to, technically, or how many paths we travel to here.
You're going to love the math that I did later.
Oh, gosh. Okay. But anyway, there's multiple, right? Of all the movies we've done so far, it's kind of singular, right? There might be one or two people time traveling or what have you, but this is like a whole group, and they're not all going to the same point in time. They're all traveling to different points in time. Like, this is a very extensive time. This is actually a very extensive time travel movie for the small spit of time that it actually happens. It's very interesting. It's very interesting.
It is indeed. But Nick, I feel like you're jumping the gun here.
Oh, no.
And it feels like you're trying to weasel your way out of.
I did it again.
Yes. Your turn for the 15-second summary.
Are you sure it's my turn?
Oh, I'm positive. So for those who don't know, Nick is tasked with today of summarizing Avengers Endgame in 15 seconds. He will do the best that he can. He will fail, and I will give him a failing grade. Or he'll do great, and I'll give him somewhat of a redeemable passing grade. But he will fail. So anyway, how we doing?
Well, I was better. I was better a few minutes ago when I was excited about the episode we were doing. But right now, less excited. I'm going to crush this 15-second summary. Hit me with the time.
Let's see it. Let's
Count
see it.
me down.
I want to see it. You ready?
Let's do it. Yeah.
Born
ready.
3, 2, 1, go.
Avengers Endgame kicks up 5 years after Infinity War. Somehow, an ant or a rat brings... This is going very poorly. Oh my God. I am inevitable.
Time. Oh my God. It was worse than I thought.
Yeah,
Nick. I think this is the first failing grade. This is an F.
Yeah,
this is the first failing grade that we've gotten.
Enough. It's definitely enough.
And this was your movie.
Listen,
Nicholas.
I came into this episode prepared to talk about the time travel, not summarize the whole film.
Sorry. I was prepared to talk about fictional quantum physics, not, the summary of a 3-hour film.
You can't summarize 3 hours of pure bliss in 15 seconds. It's not possible.
Pure bliss.
There we go. I proved that you can't do it. It's not possible. That was really bad.
I mean, you proved that you can't do it.
That was so bad.
Well done. I applaud you on our first F.
The second that I said five years later, I knew I screwed up because I already had to backtrack about how we got to 5 years later.
Right. No, that was fantastic. I want to thank you for that gift. That was very special. Oh man. All right. Well, I assume most people are familiar with this movie.
Yes.
So we'll let whoever watches this, whoever listens to this, enjoy that shit show of a summary.
I'm so sorry. I apologize.
Would you like to do a more casual take on that?
Yeah, here's a casual take, I guess. So Avengers Endgame picks up essentially 5 years after Infinity War when they are unable to bring everybody back because they find out that Thanos used the stones to destroy the stones. In the meantime, about 5 years later, a rat just so happens to step on the button that brings back Ant-Man from the quantum realm, the button that Hope was supposed to press, but she got wiped away when Thanos snapped at the exact moment she was supposed to bring him back. So we don't have to talk about, we're not going to talk about that crazy plot point there, but he comes back and then all of a sudden he realizes that, like, oh my gosh, they could technically time travel, possibly if they could figure out the science and bring everybody back that way by collecting the stones from different timelines, which is essentially what happens, right? They go to Iron Man, they go to Tony Stark, and he ends up figuring it out, how to time travel. And they get the band back together, and they go and collect the Infinity Stones from different parts of the past that they had seen them before or come across them before. And they get the Infinity Stones together. The Hulk snaps his fingers, brings everybody back. And at some point between all that, Thanos from the past figures out that in the future he completes his mission, but now that the people that were left over were trying to undo it because there was a consciousness between the nebulas of the past and the future, which is fascinating. And yeah, here we go. All Out War, Endgame, brilliant film. That's it.
See,
That's it.
Was that so hard?
I mean,
15 seconds, Nick.
That was like 2 minutes.
Time travel, am I right? Ha! So that was actually one of the many reasons I was excited to do this film with you, Nick, because throughout our time travel draft experience, we have been quoting this movie repeatedly. Specifically, the Hulk, we've been quoting like a ton, who is actually one of the funnier characters in this movie, which was, I think, a curveball for many of us. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I believe that is a satisfactory summary right there. As Nick said earlier, we really want to focus on the time travel of this film. So getting into it, in the past, we've been talking about different forms, different ideologies of time travel, right? And this one in particular, I think this one tries to explain the time travel science, perhaps. I may regret these words. Perhaps the best.
Yeah.
It really tries. It really tries to like create like these are the rules. This is like how it would work. Mm-hmm. And we're gonna do our best to like follow the rules. Now, whether it does or not, I think is up to interpretation. And we're gonna talk about that. But the particular time travel here, Nick, do you want to give it a go on the explanation here, or shall I?
You go ahead. You got this.
Okay. So, Bruce Banner explains that Back to the Future is a bunch of bullshit. And you can't go to the past and just change the future because it's not in flux like that. Because as soon as you leave the present and enter the past, the present has become your past and the past is now your new future, right? So it's a very like subjective point of view is like what he's saying. I guess kind of it's both, right? It's the fact that time is both objective and subjective, right? Like for yourself, but also you cannot like change the timeline that has already occurred, right? That's what his whole argument is.
His exact line is, if you travel to the past, that past becomes your future, and your former present becomes your past.
Right.
Which can't now be changed by your new future.
Right. Which is a hilariously simple yet complicated way of explaining that.
Right.
So I actually love this, right? Because like automatically we're establishing ground rules of, they can't just go into the past and just kill Thanos, right? Which is, Rhodey's joke.
Right. Can't we just,
First of
that's
all,
horrible.
That's horrible.
Time travel comedy film. Book
it's Thanos.
I'm so right. It's insane.
It's Thanos. Right, but he explains why they can't do that.
Right.
But the loophole of that is there's nothing that says that they can't grab an object out of the past, bring it to the future, and not have that object actually work, right? Mm-hmm. And they test that out, of course, with the baseball mitt from Clint's home. I don't think they establish exactly how long ago that was, but I guess longer than 5 years.
Matter. Right.
Yeah, it doesn't. You're right. He grabbed something from the past, brought it, proved it works, right? So the plan is, as you had mentioned, they're going to go into the past. They're going to do a time heist, which I love. There are so many time travel movie references in this movie.
Yes, it's so good.
For any fans of just weird comedies or fans of time travel movies, Time Heist is a classic time travel movie. And it was in the pool for our time travel draft, and it was ignored by both of us. It's a Taron Gilliam movie. It's weird. It's super weird.
Gilliam. He's great. We already did one from him,
is too. Great. He is great.
Awesome.
We may revisit that film if we do a time travel draft again. We'll see.
Yeah.
But in any case, they're going to do a time heist, and they're going to grab the Infinity Stones, and they're going to bring them back into the current or the present timeline, the Endgame timeline, right? So one of the hard rules, and this is important, and this is something I really didn't. I don't know if I didn't remember this or if I didn't understand this the first time. And I'm really glad that we rewatched this film because before this movie, Nick, I thought that this was a film that established its own rules for time travel and then largely ignored its own rules. And honestly, going back into it, I was like, actually, like, it pretty much, there's only one thing I can really think of that is kind of a plot hole in the rules that it establishes. Everything else is actually way more solid than I remembered. And it all comes down to the one big rule that the Ancient One establishes, right?
So glad you're bringing this up. Yeah.
Yep. And this is what I totally ignored.
Huge. This is huge. Yeah.
Because people point out that there's a lot of things about the time travel that doesn't make sense. No, they actually specifically say that it's the Infinity Stones. If you don't return the Infinity Stones, that's what creates the branch timelines that eventually get annihilated and are destroyed, right? But as long as those Infinity Stones are brought back to exactly when they were taken, then the proper flow of time will keep going, right? So largely, and except for the one thing, we'll get to that, and it's maybe a problem, maybe it's not. Largely, the film respects this rule. So like any kind of like inaccuracies or anything that doesn't feel like this follows the rules, like Thanos' army not returning to the past or Gamora not returning to the past, it doesn't need to, right? Because of the rules it established about these Infinity Stones, right? Like technically they're not from the main timeline anymore. They're from some other, I guess, branch alternate timeline, and like this has become their new timeline, right? It's a weird loophole.
Yeah, we're gonna spend some time here because there's also something to be said about the fact when Banner's talking to the Sorcerer Supreme and she's explaining what happens if you remove the Time Stone, right? If you remove the Time Stone or any stone, another timeline branches off and it creates a new timeline, right? Of course, if you bring it back to the moment that you took it, everything works according to plan, right? As you're saying. The big question that came to my head was, so wait, at the Thanos actually destroying all of the stones at the end of Infinity War, is that really what causes this multiversal war that was the next phase of Marvel, which is where we are right now? Because that never got undone, right? They just pulled Infinity Stones from the past and then brought everybody back who died, but they didn't undo anything else that happened in the 5 years. They just brought everybody back, and then they put the stones back. So the only thing that really changed was everyone who was wiped out got brought back. But everything else stayed in motion, and the Infinity Stones not being a part of the main timeline is one of those things, right? So that means that the stones were still destroyed in some timeline, potentially the current one. And and based on what the Sorcerer Supreme was saying, if you remove the Infinity Stones or the Time Stone, all hell breaks loose. And what do we have in the MCU right now is all hell breaking loose with this multiversal war that we're currently like in the midst of. So like when that part happened in Endgame, I was like, wait a minute. Is this the reason for everything else that's been happening? It's like very interesting.
that is a really good theory, actually. I really like that theory because like the way she explains it sounds like because like they are the foundation of like the universe, right? Without the stones, the universe like can't sustain itself, right? That's basically what she's saying. Like it'll fall to darkness, which like felt like a very vague reference to Dormammu specifically. But take that as metaphorical or literal, right? No matter what, universe is fucked. And yeah, I really like that idea. Now, whether or not it's accurate, I mean, we'll find out, right? It's certainly something that they can play with.
Right.
And maybe you are right. I think the way I would have interpreted it, though, is... So Thanos, like, destroys the stones, right? But they're not gone, if that makes sense. Because, like... All right, so to borrow, like, an example that, like, Rocket uses, right? When he's doing a pep talk with Thor when they're in Thor Dark World, right? And Thor's having a panic attack. And Rocket says, "Look, man, like everyone's lost people. Like, what do you think we're doing here?
Right.
There are people that are dead. And then there are people who are only, or he says there are people who are gone. And then there are people who are only kind of gone.
Kind of dead,
and like
yeah.
we can save those people, right? So like I feel like that's the same thing with the stones in this case. Like the stones like are gone, but not really. Like the things that make the stones, like the things that make the stones are still there. I feel like they just can't be accessed by like sentient life at this point. Maybe that's me way stretching, but that's my interpretation of it.
Yeah, that feels like a little bit of a stretch about like about them being able to be like to be recreated, if you will, with the resources that are left or available on the planet or in the world. I think that using your thoughts would make more sense if you were referencing the fact that because time travel has now been invented in the universe, technically they aren't totally gone because time travel has been established. So you could technically go back through time and do it again and grab the stones again and bring them to your present and then put them back. So I think I like
point,
that theory better.
Yeah.
Right? Like they're not. It's the same concept. It's more about the fact that time travel has been established now, so you can just go back and get them if you really need to or want to. Instead.
Okay, I actually just thought of. I just thought of perhaps a dumb argument against the ancient one. So her whole argument is, if you remove the stones from the timeline, then that would doom the universe. But that suggests that time is linear. And that the stones would never have existed if you took them out. But they did, right? And we all know that time is a flat circle, so the stones always exist in the past, so there's no reason for the universe to not exist because the stones still exist, even if you remove them from the timeline and put them in the future. They're still there.
Well, it's the universe
they always happened.
It's, because what we know now of he who remains creating them to make them happen.
Wait, creating. I'm confused. He who remains creating the stones?
Not creating the stones, but creating the timeline, and then, right? Because my theory here is that there's one timeline currently in this Endgame MCU, right? And if you take one of the stones out, you start creating a branch timeline,
right?
Which is what He Who Remains is trying to avoid, which we find out later.
Right.
So, with that in mind, he's using the stones as a way to keep order and keep one timeline in rotation. At least one of the ways he's doing it, right? Another way he's doing it is with the TVA and all these other things, right? But at least that conversation with the Sorcerer Supreme kind of implies that it's one of the ways that he's keeping the singular timeline intact with the Infinity Stones. So, and again, when Thanos destroys them, uses the stones to destroy the stones, he essentially creates this ripple effect, which is what we're currently still dealing with.
Right.
Potentially. I don't know.
I actually really love your theory on why the multiverse exists.
Yeah.
Right? Because, like, I mean, their idea of time travel is like a multiverse time travel idea, right? It's very Dragon Ball Z. See, I didn't reference Lost. How about that? It's very Dragon Ball Z.
By saying you didn't reference Lost, you inadvertently referenced Lost, and here
I referenced previous
circle.
episodes of May the Review Be With You, not Lost.
Okay.
Maybe you should listen to it sometime. But anyway, yeah, it's if you're familiar, I know you are, but if anyone listening is familiar with like the Android saga, Trunks goes back in time to warn our heroes of androids that are coming from the future. Very Terminator-esque. Yeah. And by him talking to the past and warning the past, he inadvertently creates another timeline, right? Multiverse, baby. And that's basically what the Ancient One is implying here, right? It's by doing this, you create the multiverse, and that's what you're suggesting, which I wonder, to really get expansive on this, in Loki, there's a line that Renslayer says that I've been so curious about for a long time now, and it's when Loki argues to Renslayer when he's on trial about his crimes, right, of becoming a variant, and he says, well, what about the Avengers, right? Like, they did their whole time heist thing, like, why aren't they here? And she specifically says what they did was supposed to happen. Supposed to happen. And we still haven't gotten an explanation quite yet as to what that means. But
well, oh my God. Oh, this is so great. I'm so glad you just said that. That was supposed to happen. Because without that happening, Loki doesn't end up in the TVA. And Loki needed to be in the TVA because He Who Remains was trying to look for somebody else to take over.
Because he wrote it that way.
That's why.
See that? All right. You want to get really crazy here? Okay. So, all right.
But it's yeah. You go ahead.
Okay. So time's a flat circle, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So, all right. Avengers, what they did, the time heist, it's supposed to happen. Like what you said, he wrote it that way because Loki is supposed to eventually be the Loki variant that succeeds him, right? But you could also take this into meaning that it's supposed to happen because Tony Stark needs to invent time travel, right? So that eventually a Kang, not necessarily the Kang that we saw or the Victor Timely of the past, but a Kang of the future, eventually is able to build on the foundation of that and begin, the multiverse crossover, right? In which like they all start meeting each other, and then eventually the multiverse war happens, and then everything explodes, and then the sacred timeline is created, and then the He Who Remains writes it out like, okay, that still has to happen, but I'm going to make sure that like the Loki like comes to like supersede me, right? You see what I'm talking about, right?
What happened first, the multiversal war or Tony Stark inventing time travel?
Yeah. Yes.
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 Repeat. What happened first, the multiversal war or Tony Stark inventing time travel? Joe's answer?
Yes.
Time travel.
Time travel. Am I right?
Oh, I love it. I absolutely love it. Oh my goodness.
Bananas.
Okay. This is fascinating. It's going to be really cool to see what other people think about this. What's next? So
let me ask you something about the time travel. The method of time travel.
Very cool.
What did you think about the method of time travel?
I thought it was very cool. I thought that giving us like that little scene with Tony Stark figuring it out, if you will, right? It's like an inverted Mobius strip, I think is what it was called. And Mobius strip inverted, like figures out time travel at his home. Super cool scene. I have no idea what that means, like if it's any kind of term that's sort of related to time travel in our real life. I don't know. But that was a cool little scene. But the method for time travel is awesome. I thought it was sweet. The suits are really cool. Definitely, I think maybe the coolest time travel suits we've seen so far in our draft. I don't know if I'm trying to think ahead. I don't know if there's other suits that are cooler coming up. Definitely cool. And then, the method is really badass, right? Like they build this huge platform that essentially like it takes all of them to where they have to go. So it's not just a one-way. It's a double trip, right? It's a two-way trip, but it's also a multi time frame machine as well, right? It can send multiple people to multiple places in time simultaneously. And then because of the Pym particles, it can bring you back right when you need to come back. There's no time limit. It's like, get it done. We'll see you in 10 minutes or whatever. Fascinating. Mind-bending. Very cool. Explained surprisingly well, right? And then there's time travel within the time travel because Tony Stark and Captain America and Ant-Man don't complete their mission because of Loki, right? Loki...
Well, technically because of the Hulk.
Well, because of the Hulk, yeah. Technically because of the Hulk. and then Loki steals the Tesseract, disappears. That's where the Loki series branches off into the TVA. But then they realize that they don't have the Tesseract, and so Captain America and Tony Stark are thinking, where else can they get more Pym particles and the Tesseract? And they end up going further in time, back in time. So it's time travel within time travel. Fascinating.
So what they do in both instances, right? Because like first it's they figure out if we go to the quantum realm, we can exit through specific points in time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then they take that a step further with, well, we had limited Pym particles, but we can actually go to a very specific point that has an Infinity Stone and Pym particles, right? So both of these almost feel like, to me, how familiar are you with speed running in video games?
Slightly familiar.
Okay, so, one of the ways that, like, speed run is you really, like, push the limits of, like, a game, and, like, you look for, like, bugs or, like, ways that you can break the game in certain ways so you can, like, cheat or, like, get through something, right? And, like, that almost feels like what they did, but with reality. They figured out, like, how to cheat reality and push the limits on it to speed run how do we save half the universe, right?
Yeah.
And they did. They did it within 3 hours. Pretty good. That's a record. That's a record.
Pretty good.
Pretty good. But yeah, I too also really like the methodology. Specifically, I love the idea of time traveling via space. Let me explain that. So, like, when you look at the universe, you can move through space. We are moving forward through time. But I love the idea of, like, physically moving through space in order to, like, move backward in time. A movie that does that really well, whether or not you enjoyed this movie, is Tenet. I love that they physically have to go backwards to go through time, you know? And this isn't exactly the same thing, but they are visiting a physical place in order to exit at a different place because time is relative, right? And time fluctuates very differently in the quantum realm, which is really cool because it's a place that's outside of time, technically. How that works, I have no freaking idea because it seems like it has its own timeline in the quantum realm. Yeah. And, like, is there only one quantum realm and, like, all of the multiverse has access to that quantum realm, or does each, like, timeline have its own quantum realm? Right, because, like, the end of Loki almost makes it sound like each timeline has its own quantum realm, which is a little confusing if that's true.
Oh man, that's a great question.
Because they specifically say they make an Ant-Man quantum realm reference at the finale of Loki. Because they specifically said, yeah, there was a Kang that was acting up in 616 in a subspace of 616, but they took care of it. So it's like a subspace, not the subspace, right?
Yeah, that means that there must, every timeline's got its own quantum realm. That's crazy.
Right?
That's insane. The potential for... Marvel's just gonna go on forever. It's awesome.
Oh, speaking of forever. Okay, yeah, sorry. To go back to my speed run metaphor.
Yeah.
So, like, they basically invented a way to, like, fix all of their problems, like, forever. Like, in two ways, right? Because, like, first, like, there's the issue with, like, I guess just anything, but, like, at least there were stakes. This is actually a potential flaw with the movie. So what makes, a conflict interesting is when there are stakes, right? And one of the things that made the time heist interesting is they've got enough for one trip, right? And because of Tony's workaround of going to what is it? Is it an army base or?
Yeah, army base.
Okay, want to make sure I get my branches right. U.S. Army. All right. Respect. Anyway, so yeah, they're able to go there, get the stone, and get the Pym particles. It's very convenient. However, it is a very fun location. It's a very fun scene, so I'm willing to overlook it. However, it kind of does erase the stakes of the whole conflict, right? You can argue that, like, new stakes are involved once Thanos' army is, like, introduced, but I don't know. I don't know if I buy that.
The stakes are still there because if they fail, they don't come back from that timeline.
Yes, but once once they have the Pym particles, the
Right.
stakes are almost gone, right? At least for their knowledge, the stakes are kind of gone, right? I guess like in their eyes, the only way that they can really screw up now is if they somehow die using the Infinity Gauntlet.
Right.
Um,
Of course, while this is all happening, there's something else at play, right? Which is the Nebula Consciousness Network, basically sharing future memories with her past self, which is
that is a cool plot point.
fascinating plot point. I loved it. And then, of course, Thanos being able to time travel as well, because of Nebula. Um, yeah. Um, a really fascinating plot point. So like, it breeds the question that like consciousness has access to any point in time, essentially.
Well, so they're a
But
special case though.
yeah, because she's like technically, a machine
Well,
and a network, and it's like a network that she's on, right?
yeah.
So she's like sharing a network. So that does make sense, but it's still cool.
Yeah. No, it was a really cool and like interesting plot point. And it's not like we ever knew that there was like a network that like revolved around Nebula before,
Yeah.
but it was an interesting enough idea that it didn't matter.
Yeah.
And I feel like it was the kind of idea that gets introduced in the movie, and you're just like, oh yeah, no, that makes sense. You know, like you just automatically buy into it. You're like, yes, yes. Tell me more.
It does actually make some sense because she's on a network, like her own network, right? So if a future Nebula goes back to the past to where her past self is on the same network, it
right,
does kind of make sense.
That does make sense, right?
Yeah.
Like if she's like getting signals from a specific
Right.
network that is just for her, like she's
Right.
got her own like Google Cloud space, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Then yeah, like basically it would be like having like a satellite that revolves on a network and then introducing a second satellite that would be on the same network, and they're sharing all the same information,
Yeah.
right? Except the information at this point is events that the previous satellite did not have access to before, which is a really cool idea. Yeah, it is one of the more fascinating ideas that they play with as far as time travel goes, and it is what enacts like the whole third act of this movie, right? Which gives us our mandatory Avengers army battle at the end. It has to happen in every Avengers movie. There must be a huge collision of sides going on. But it was still awesome. It was, I mean, it's like not even close. It's the best one. It's the best freaking army fight.
Yeah, it's really good. Yeah, it's fantastic. But the time travel's not done yet, right? After the battle, they have to put the stones back. And Captain America he's a solo trip. He's putting everything back, right? And this is where some other questions arise about this is the breaking rules of time travel question here, kind of, right? So he goes. It's supposed to be a 5-second trip for Hulk and Bucky and Sam while they're waiting for him, but he doesn't come back. Like Captain America doesn't return like he's supposed to. He misses his jump point, Hulk says, and so we're like, well, where did he go? What happened? And all of a sudden, Bucky looks up and tells Sam to look over there, and there's a guy sitting on a bench. And we know now, obviously, that it's Steve Rogers, but not the Steve Rogers that like we know. Not big and brawny and like super strong. He looks like the Steve Rogers who never went into the chamber to take the serum. Which I've always had questions about this. It's like he obviously stayed behind. I don't know. I actually don't know. Because he doesn't look like the Captain America that we know, right? So did he stop himself from going in the chamber, and then like what happened to the version of him? Did it just like disappear? Help me.
All right, so I have two thoughts on this, right? The first is this feels like a very specific reference to the comics. I don't know if it necessarily is, and I'll talk about why later, but there is a moment in the comics where we do get old man Steve Rogers in the current like Marvel timeline. And it's funny what you said about how he looks like he doesn't have the super soldier serum anymore, right? Because in the comics, the reason why we get Old Man Rogers is because the Red Skull ends up like sucking the super soldier serum out of him. And as a result, like he goes through like accelerated aging, right? Like all the aging he didn't do because of the super soldier serum, he like all of a sudden, like a minute, like it all catches up to him, right? And now he's like this geriatric dude. Which actually is awesome. He ends up becoming like the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. and like him and Tony getting this huge fight. It's amazing. Anyway, so it felt like it was that, right? I don't think necessarily it is, but the fact that he doesn't look like he has the super soldier serum anymore does make you wonder what's happened with this Steve, right? Okay, the Steve thing. Okay, so as you point out, we get old man Steve. He blew past his post where he was supposed to return instantly, right? And instead, we get this old man Steve, and we come to find out Steve pulled a Tony and went to go get some of that good life, and he stayed behind with his lady love Peggy, and he finally got that dance, right? Which was solid way to end Phase 3. Just bravo on the choice of ending, right?
Right.
However, this okay, so remember earlier I said actually the time travel is pretty solid all the way through, except for one really big thing. Like it's this. Like this is the one thing that really doesn't make any sense. Right? Yep. Like for the rules that they set up. Because if he went into the past to return the stones and then like lived life with Peggy, this would imply it's an alternative timeline. Mm-hmm. And if that is indeed the case, that's fine. But how did he get back to this one? Right? That doesn't really track.
Yeah, because the thing that doesn't make any sense is then the whole time there are two Steve Rogers and Captain Americas in that era. You understand what I'm saying? Because future Captain America goes back in time to meet Peggy and spend the time with Peggy. But in that same timeline, I guess technically he's in the ice. So
he's in the ice for most of the time,
he's actually in the ice for most of the time. So actually it could work, but then he's probably living in hiding most of the time he's there.
So it does and it doesn't, right?
So
because part of the reason why S.H.I.E.L.D. gets created, so Peggy is like in the MCU, Peggy is one of the reasons why S.H.I.E.L.D. gets created, and her whole motivation for doing so is because Steve's not around. And Steve returning, I mean, I guess depending on when Steve comes back,
right,
it might mess that up, right? I mean, assuming he comes right back to the base, right? I don't think S.H.I.E.L.D. technically exists at that point. Maybe I'm wrong.
But there's even more questions because, like, Peggy dies in Winter Soldier.
Oh, I got something for this, right? Okay.
So, you know where I'm going, right? Like,
yeah, I do.
Peggy dies in Winter Soldier. So did this Steve just hangs out for another 5 years, like by himself, and doesn't like tell anyone that Thanos is coming, and just decides that everything has to happen how it happened? And
I mean, he technically, let's say like he is there, right?
But I guess it does
he
because
knows
of the time travel rules they set up. Your present, your past,
he can't change
become your right. Yeah.
Right. God, right. So like, let's assume that he is in the main timeline throughout the entire thing. Okay, you ready for this? You're gonna like this. Okay. And yeah, he's kind of letting things happen because like he knows he can't change it. So like there's no point. So he's just gonna live his life and he's gonna let the Avengers handle it because he knows how things end in the end anyway, right? As it messed up as it kind of is to like let Bucky suffer, but he can't change it, right? Okay. So there is the question of like, well, so like he was with Peggy this whole time, but like no he wasn't, because like we know he wasn't. Okay. So I don't remember which video this where this video takes place. I'm not sure if it's in Winter Soldier or if it's in Civil War. Wait, no, Peggy doesn't die in Winter Soldier. Peggy dies in Civil War. Remember, he goes to the funeral in Civil War. He recognizes
Civil War. Okay.
Peggy has dementia in Winter Soldier.
Got it. Okay.
Okay, so maybe this happens in Winter Soldier. There's a video where he's able to watch like the Peggy from the past talk about Steve. This must be in Winter Soldier, where he's at like a Captain America museum, and he's watching Peggy like talk about Steve, and she specifically starts referencing all the people that Steve saved. And she says specifically, including the man who became my husband. She never says who her husband is. She might be referencing that Steve saved her husband, meaning like Steve. Steve saved Steve. You know what I mean? It's possible. He could have always been there.
Yeah, he was always there.
Yeah, we don't know who the husband was.
It's a loop. And of course, the person who's going to stay true to how the timeline works and not meddle is Captain America. The purest heart, you know? If it was Tony Stark, he might be trying to do some stuff. Oh, this is fascinating. I love it. This is a great combo. Okay. I have nothing else on my notes about the time travel.
I have one more thing about the time travel.
What's up?
Okay. So this is a flaw. So the whole plan is to, after the time heist and after they bring everyone back, and then, you know, unexpectedly they use the stones to dust Thanos, they have to return the stones. Mm-hmm. And presumably they do that. Mm-hmm. Okay, so there are two things about that journey that I really want to know. A, I wish we could see what happens when Steve returns the Soul Stone and he sees the Red Skull, right? Like, not a flaw, just something I wish I could see, right?
Wait.
Did you just think of it?
When he returns the Soul Stone, he has the Red Skull suck his power. Like you were just saying. You've already touched on. That's exactly what it is. That's how it happens. The comic scene happens. They just don't tell us about it. That's it.
Interesting.
That's it.
Interesting.
That's totally, because he does. He has to bring the Soul Stone back to the Red Skull, and he sees the Red Skull, and he probably figures out that the Red Skull can just take his power.
That's very interesting. And I love that idea. I hope we get that movie. No, that's not what I was going to say, but that's a great idea.
That's not a movie. That's a TV show. That's a TV show.
You're right.
That would be a cool TV show. It'd be like WandaVision-esque in a way.
Right. I watched the heck out of that. No, it's not what I was going to say. What I was going to say was, okay, so as interesting as that conversation would be, or that confrontation would be, there's a problem with the whole concept of him returning the Soul Stone.
Yes.
How do you return the Soul Stone?
Yeah, how do you return the Soul Stone?
You can't. You can't, right? You can't return the Soul Stone.
Right. The only way you can even get it is by
what's done is done, right?
Love.
Like Natasha killed herself. That can't be undone. The Soul Stone is there, right? Like you can't really return it. I mean, you could leave it in the water, I guess, but like...
Yeah, but the Soul Stone has to get lost, though, right? Or is it only ever... Can you only ever get it once from there? You see what I'm saying?
I mean, I guess that it goes into question of like, how did that like mystical like ritual like come to be, right? Like who did that?
That's really the question, is how does this ritual actually work?
Right.
Because
what's the origin of that?
We know that you can take the Soul Stone and then use it or keep it, and there doesn't seem to be a time limit for how long you keep it. But we also don't know if you can really lose it and then kind of like the whole, if no one knows where the Soul Stone is, then that means the only place you can go is here to grab it. That kind of thing.
You know what would have been super interesting?
The lore would be cool to know behind that whole concept of the Soul Stone.
It would be. I would have. Oh, man. Okay, don't get me wrong. The ending that they have is way better, but like, how interesting would it have been if so Natasha gets screwed going after the Soul Stone, right? Like when it's her and Clint, like she's like, well, if that's what's got to be, like it's gonna be me, like like as far as picking straws go, like she got the short straw, right? Like that sucks.
Mm-hmm.
All right, what if Steve goes back and in trying to like return the stone, there's like a monkey's paw like to it, and like he ends up taking like the Skull's place, right? Because like Skull is like bound there, right? Until Natasha does what she does, and like presumably he's free. But like, what if he like gets chained like the same way? Like now Steve is just stuck there forever. Oh man, sorry. I'm a sucker for dark endings like that. But yeah, that's all I've got is just how does that work, right? It feels like that's a permanent thing that can't be done.
Yeah, it does feel like that's a big question for sure that we never get an answer to. Mm-hmm. But other than that, it's pretty solid time travel mechanic and information that we get.
Yeah, it's not as problematic as people point out, because there's a lot of people who say like the time travel doesn't make any sense. But like if you really focus on what not necessarily what Banner says, but what the Ancient One says, right?
Right.
Then it actually holds up pretty well. I think later Marvel properties kind of mess with the rules of time travel like a lot.
Right.
And that's definitely its own thing. I'm looking at you, Miss Marvel. But that's a conversation for a different day. And we are only talking about this movie. So,
yeah.
Nick, I think it is time that we move on from time travel here. But before we do, let's take a quick word from our sponsors. All right, welcome back. We are continuing our discussion of Endgame, and we have scores left to do here, Nick. But before we do, I was wondering if you could, I don't know if you've done homework on this or not, so my bad for just kind of springing this on you. Can you tell me something I don't know about this movie?
Oh, man. Oh, do I have anything? I forgot. I knew you did. You should have warned me about this because I could have looked it up. But let me think.
All right.
Let me just look real quick.
I have something.
Oh, great. What's yours? Bail me out, man.
Okay. Let me tell you something you might not know about Endgame. Nick, do you know how the line "I am Iron Man" came to be in this movie?
Like, no, at the end when Tony Stark says it after he takes the stones?
Yeah.
Oh, I forgot. I think I'd read this, but I don't remember.
All right, so it's a cool story. So first off, they being Joe and Anthony Russo, they write this, they write the story, and they decide that a really fitting character ending for Tony would be for him to die, for him to make the self-sacrificing play, a call back to Avengers 1, right? Yep. Him very much taking up like a Steve-esque mantra, which is very fitting since Steve takes up a very Tony-esque mantra at the end of the movie, right? Anyway, so they decide on that. Fun little tangent. When Jon Favreau read the ending, he called them and said that you can't do this. You can't kill Tony Stark. You're going to have audiences walk out of theaters and walk into traffic if you do this. They eventually sold him on the idea. But something that they didn't have was what are Tony's last lines. And like the amount of pressure to like do so, like they've really felt that. They'll talk about like in interviews how like they've never felt like pressure like that ever before, like this character that everyone loves like so much and has meant so much to this franchise of a decade. How do you send him off, right, with a bang? And they had Tony come in and redo his last line 2 different times, and they thought they had something that stuck, right? So they had Tony leave, they had Robert Downey Jr. leave. They're the same person.
Who are we kidding?
Yeah. Anyway, the editor of this film is Jeff Ford. And Jeff Ford worked on the original Iron Man. He's the main editor of a bunch of other Marvel films. So he's been involved in like Tony's journey through like the entire MCU, right? And it's just so fitting that this happens. So he's in the room with Joe and Anthony, and they're watching the last scene, and they're cutting it together with Josh Brolin and him doing his like "I am inevitable," right? And he plays like the "I am inevitable" scene, and just off the cuff, like Jeff's just like, "Yeah, I am Iron Man," just like as a joke, and like Joe and Anthony both like turn to him and they're like, "What did you just say?" And he's like, "Oh, like the first movie, I am Iron Man," and they're like, "Oh my God, that's it." And like they call Robert like right away and they're like, "Robert, we're so sorry. We need you to come back in." And Robert Downey Jr. is like, "No." he straight up said, "No, I'm not doing it." And like, because at this point he had said goodbye to the character twice, right? And which like you got to think like that's got to be really hard as an actor, right? To like walk away from like this person that you kind of are at this point, right? They eventually convince him. They explain, like, this is the line we really want to do. We think it's extremely fitting. They sell him on it. They get him in the suit. And, like, of course, it is, like, one of, like, the most memorable lines of the entire franchise.
Oh, so good. What a story. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Editors are important. Write that down.
Editor's note. Editors are important.
I love that. Oh, that's fantastic. Hell yeah. Great story. All right. Scores.
So the way we do this for our time travel draft, we rank this in 3 different categories. Of course, we rank the movie itself out of 5. We rank how it did within the category of time travel comedy out of 5. And then we rank the time travel mechanics out of 5. Nick, I think I went first last time. For overall movie,
okay,
what do you rank it?
Oh, man, this is highest score for overall film. I absolutely adore this movie. It's fantastic. 4.8.
Whoa, 4.8, baby.
Yeah, I actually think Infinity War is better, but this is a fantastic ending. And if this was Infinity War, it probably would be a 5, because I don't give many 5s out, but that movie is damn near perfect.
I actually would agree with you there. I love Infinity War. I think it's
4.8
one of the strongest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I'm gonna go a little lower, not by a ton, because I think this movie, I think it's at its best, man, does it sell on 10 years of storytelling, right?
Yeah, it's so good.
At its worst, it can be a little messy, just a teensy bit, and it really relies. It has to. It really relies on everything that came before, and in some cases, I would say in most cases, that's great. Because of what this is. It's the end of 10 years of storytelling, right? But like as one individual film, right? I think like if you're just walking into this movie blind, which I don't know why you would, it's like, what? Like you're not going to feel the emotional attachment, right?
Just a little harsh sometimes on these. If you grade it by just one film, it's it's the end of a 10-year. You infuriate me sometimes.
I'm still going to give it a 4.5.
Okay. Oh my God. A 4.5. Here come the pitchforks online.
I'm just saying. If it's just the film, it's okay. But as like a punctuation mark to 10 years of storytelling, damn.
Am I that far ahead of you in the time travel draft? You got to be giving low scores for stuff.
Oh yeah, like 4 or 5 is low. All right, let's do time travel mechanic here.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
How we doing?
So this movie does really well. I think it's actually one of the better ones in our draft so far, at least. It's not perfect, especially because of the end, what we talked about at the end. So I can't give it a 5. But it's really good as far as staying within its own rules and making us think even more a little bit about the other multiversal potential here. So I'm actually going to give it a 4.7 for time travel.
I'm actually going to go a little higher here. I'm going to go 4.9.
Yeah,
see, honestly, like
I was trying not to be a stan and be biased with my own film. It's tough.
It is tough. I respect that though. Yeah, no, I think people are way too harsh on the time travel of this movie. I think overall it actually works really well. Really, the only questions that linger are the whole Steve thing and the whole Soulstone thing. And honestly, like, it's not necessarily something that is a flaw. It's something that I don't know, you can make your own conclusions, right? It's not a blatant flaw, is what I'm trying to say.
Right.
It's just enough to like raise your eyebrow. Okay, category.
Oh,
This was very controversial last time.
yeah. Still mad at you about that. So this fits into the category extremely well. Like, I'm going to read you some of the funny quotes that I wrote down to prove that this movie is hilarious. Right off the bat, at the beginning of the film, when Tony Stark meets Rocket for the first time, okay? And he looks at Rocket and he's just like, honestly, I thought you were a Build-A-Bear. And Rocket's response is, maybe I am. That is unquestionably hilarious. This is basically like within the first 5 minutes of the movie. Time travel comedy. You've got... and then right after that, Rhodey goes... when he's talking to when they meet Captain Marvel, and Captain Marvel's like, I'm gonna go take care of Thanos myself, and he goes, hey, listen, everyone in here is about that superhero life, okay? Like, this is like the beginning of the film, and all you're doing is laughing. And then you've got all the Thor or the Hulk quotes, right? Like when he's time travel, making Ant-Man time travel, which we didn't even talk about the Ant-Man test time travel, like with the problems there. We probably should have done that.
Yeah, we probably should have. They discovered the secret to immortal life.
Yeah.
Right? Like I meant to bring that up. Right? They cured death. They cured death. No one has to die in this universe ever again of old age.
Yeah, because they brought the young version of. They turned him into a baby, basically. Right? So you could just forever be young.
Yeah.
If you want.
Yeah, they cured it.
Oh my gosh. But like those scenes are hilarious with Thor, okay? Like this movie is funny. And all I'm doing is convincing myself more and more and more that this movie is a 5 out of 5 in the category. And you know what? I'm going with a 5. It's a 5 out of 5.
Bold.
And that's it.
There it is.
Fits perfectly.
5.0. I feel like that is definitely a little reactive to my last score on your movie from last time with Terminator. That's fine. That's fine. That's why we do this. And I'm gonna come in with a score now. And as Thanos would say, this will help make it balanced, as all things should be. All right, Nick. So in your dissertation here of why this movie is a comedy, and you stated that the beginning of this movie is very funny, you conveniently neglected the part where Clint loses his entire family within the first 3 minutes of the movie, which is devastating and horrifically sad.
Oh, there were some horrifically sad parts. I'm also sure that
the entire motivation of the film.
Listen, there are some people who might think that opening part was hilarious. I'm not one of those people. Those people probably exist.
Fascinating argument.
Listen, you're telling me that a comedy film has to be all comedy the whole way, and
definitely
there's not any drama
definitely not.
And any disappointment?
The first joke comes in at minute 11 of this movie. So we get outside of 10 minutes. Nick, I was paying attention, and here's the math, all right? There are 78 jokes in this movie, all right? Which admittedly was more than I thought there were going
70,
to be.
You counted the jokes?
I counted the jokes.
You son of a
there's 78 jokes in this movie.
There's probably more than that, but that's fine.
Yeah, I guess it really does depend on your interpretation of a joke. Because there were definitely some things that I was like, that's more of a quip than a joke.
You're a little shit.
So yeah, maybe there's more. However, by the Joe metric, you will enjoy knowing that the "That's America's ass" joke, that was joke number 50, which I thought was extremely appropriate. Definitely a coincidence, but maybe it's not.
Listen, that sounds like a lot of jokes for a comedy
for 3
film.
hours.
Time travel comedy.
I think you I think you hit it best when you said this movie is funny. This movie is funny. Is this movie a comedy? I raise my eyebrow at this. Does it work in the category? Yes, I will support that. I will support that it works in the category.
Thank you, sir.
Does it work in the category strongly?
Yes.
I will bump up my score slightly because of that joke. It was going to be 3-9. Now it's a 4-1 because you made me laugh.
I accept it. Thank you.
You made me laugh.
Thank you.
By the way, my favorite joke easily is a rocket joke. And it's what we were talking about earlier when he's talking to Thor, and he's talking about how like we've all lost people. You've lost people. I've lost people. I lost Quill, Drax, the chick with the antenna.
Yes.
I always forget about it. It always sneaks up on me.
That whole scene is so good too, because when Thor meets his mom, right? And this is another thing that I thought was really funny. He's talking to his mom, and his mom notices that like he's from a different time, and like points it out. And Thor's trying to deny it. He's like, no, it's me, whatever. She's like, and then he just breaks down. He's like, I'm totally from the future. You're right. I'm totally from the future. He's so broken.
This is so I guess Ragnarok is the beginning of when we get like very funny Thor.
Yeah.
They maintain it in this movie. I don't know. I think like where this is a conversation for a different day, but like, the whole argument about Love and Thunder and like that movie being controversial. I don't know. I feel like because of where he ends in Endgame, where he is in Love and Thunder kind of makes a lot of sense to me as someone who is still pretty broken, right?
Yeah. Oh, of course. Yeah. We've reviewed Love and Thunder. I think we both really enjoyed that film. So whatever, the flack it gets online, we don't think is too warranted necessarily. And anyway, that's a review
for another time. So next time, time travel draft. That's on me, and it's Midnight in Paris, baby. Woo-hoo. Kind of the reason why we started this time travel draft, actually. Yeah. So that'll be awesome to revisit that. But yeah, any final notes here, Nicholas?
You couldn't live with your own failure. Where did that bring you? Back to me.
All right, it's back down to a 3-9. Time travel, baby.
Had to do it.
Either it all makes sense or none of it does. I'm actually surprised we didn't make more. We've been Hulk quoting throughout this entire time travel draft experience, and we barely did it this episode.
It's because we didn't talk about the Scott time travel scenes very much.
Yeah, we really
that's
didn't.
Where all of his time travel jokes are when he screws it up.
That's all right. Next episode, I'm sure we'll make tons of references.
It's Scott. He's a baby. He'll grow.
Grow. Fantastic. 10 out of 10. You know what?
So good.
It's not a 3-9 anymore. It's a 10 out of 5.
Ah, well, that's a landslide for me. I win the time travel draft. Book it.
All right, that'll do it for us. Catch us next time on May the Review Be With You.
Peace. Hell yeah.